I'm Jennifer Dye, a librarian at Detroit Public Library. Thank you for joining us for the last session of our partnership with the League of Women Voters Detroit for 2020-2021. We launched this series last fall, and it has been a very successful partnership. We've covered topics ranging from the history of African Americans in the suffrage movement, through the operation of the Michigan Redistricting Commission, to how political cartoons happen. If you have a topic that you would like us to cover starting next fall, please send the suggestion to me at jdye@detroitpubliclibrary.org. And I ask that you please thank Cheryl Bukoff and Ruth Colwin for the excellent work that they have done as the program committee. And Ruth has done our artwork very well. Now I'd like to introduce Rhonda Craig, President of the League of Women Voters Detroit.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. I applaud your participation in our program. It shows that you have an interest in the workings of our government and in the prosperity of our city. Let me tell you a little bit about the Detroit League of Women Voters. It's a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization with national, state, and local components. For over a century, we have worked to empower voters by informing our citizens about local candidates, public policy, and advocacy programs. We encourage informed and active participation in government. The League does not endorse candidates or political parties. Our goal is to have elected officials represent our entire community, not just a few. We work to ensure that every vote is counted and that our voting systems are fair, free, and accessible to all. We invite everyone to make democracy work in our communities. The League of Women Voters Detroit is open to new members who share our ideals. We register new voters, we educate voters on upcoming elections, and we advocate for voters' rights. We work to engage Detroit, Hamtramck, and Highland Park citizens in local governance, decision-making, and issues of interest. Our membership is open to everyone, including men, and we seek diversity, equity, inclusion in all our endeavors. So I'm urging everyone to join because you can be a force for change for your community, for yourself, and your country. Our motto is democracy is not a spectator sport. So check us out at lwvdetroit.org or on Facebook under LWV Detroit. We have a couple of things coming up in July. We have some candidate forums. On July 19th, we have a forums for the Hamtramck mayor. And you can check these out on our website to find out how you can, if there's Zoom candidate forums, so you can participate that way. On July 22nd, we have the candidate forums for city clerk and city council at large races. And for July 27th, we have a candidate forum for Detroit mayor. So as you can check us out at on our webpage to find out about all our activities and learn more about the League and join us. Thank you very much. I turn it back over to Jennifer.
Thank you. Tonight, we will be looking primarily at the Police Commission portion of the proposed revision of the Detroit City Charter, though there will be some information about the charter as a whole. The charter revisions are scheduled to be on the ballot in the August 3rd election. The questions we'll be covering include: what is the mission of the city charter? How was the current City Charter Revision Commission formed, and what was its mandate? How the city charter revisions, if approved by the voters, will affect the police commission's responsibilities and work, and what are the issues at this moment concerning the city charter's revision, and how could this affect the police commission? Our speakers tonight are Melanie White. Melanie was born and raised in Detroit, she is an experienced oversight practitioner with over 17 years of civilian oversight experience. She is motivated by making a positive impact and improving our community. Melanie is passionate about working together with others to ensure justice, equality, and the protection of fundamental rights for all. As interim secretary to the Board of Police Commissioners, executive manager of policy, Melanie leads the day-to-day operations for the Board of Police Commissioners and serves as the administrative liaison between the board and the Detroit Police Department to ensure transparency and accountability. Advancing through the ranks within the BOPC organization, Melanie helped lead the organization during the 13-year United States Department of Justice consent decree regarding the civilian oversight process. Through Melanie's commitment and oversight, practitioners that through Melanie's commitment and dedication to the board, she was instrumental in developing a training curriculum for investigative oversight practitioners that ultimately helped reduce the extensive case backlog and alleviate fines and fees for the city of Detroit. Additionally, as an active organizational member of the NACOL, the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement, Melanie has presented and shepherded workshops during the annual conference that provide training for oversight practitioners from around the globe. She holds a Juris Doctor from Western Michigan University Cooley Law School, a Master's of Public Administration from Wayne State University, and a Bachelor's of Arts degree in Political Science from Norfolk State University. Melanie is a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated and is a professional trombonist. Melanie continues to enjoy Detroit as her home. And our other guest this evening is Denzel McCampbell. He is a lifelong Detroiter, raised on the East Side and currently living on the West Side. Since high school, he has been dedicated to increasing representation by marginalized groups, responding to the values that his parents instilled in him. He was active in advocating for the rights of MSU students, interned on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., and continued working on voting rights and other social justice issues when he returned to Detroit. As a founding member of BYP 100, Denzel has fought against police brutality, the criminalization of our communities, and mass incarceration. He is currently serving as an elected Detroit City Charter Commissioner, working with the other commissioners to revise the city charter to better serve Detroit citizens. Denzel also serves as communications advisor for Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib. I made a mistake in my transcription there, so I missed part of that sentence. And he is a board member for the Sugar Law Center for Economic and Social Justice and the Mary Turner Center for Advocacy. Thank you both for appearing with us this evening. We're going to start with a brief introduction, a brief history and overall purpose of the City Charter Revision Commission and the recommended revisions made. This is presented by Denzel McCampbell.
Thank you so much. And thank you all again for having me. I really appreciate the time to give a little background of the Charter Revision Commission, the work that we've done, and to talk about the revisions we made for the Board of Police Commission. Just to start off, to give folks a background of the Charter Commission. In 2018, in August of 2018, the Detroit voters voted to, by a very narrow margin, to open the charter up for revisions. This came about because the 2012 charter that voters approved dictated that that a question was be presented to Detroit voters in 2018. The commission then had made a wide range of changes, and they wanted to make sure that Detroiters had the chance, if those changes weren't working out, to go back and have further revisions. So after that question passed, a charter revision commission was then placed on the ballot. This is a nine-member body, and folks ran citywide for office to be placed on the commission. That commission was seated immediately after in November 2018. And since then, we've been engaged in work of engaging community members, organizations, governmental entities around what changes they'd like to see to the charter, what was how effective the current charter performed in their duties, and the view that residents have for the charter. Through that work, we've held over, I would say, 1,000 hours of meetings with the Charter Revision Commission. This consisted of listening sessions, focus groups from various community members, including a focus group on civilian oversight that did in detail research of civilian oversight in the city of Detroit and across the country. We've had over 500 revisions submitted to the charter, and each and every one of those revisions were heard by the various subcommittees and were considered by the committee of the whole. After that process of listening and deciding on the revisions, we then went and established a draft proposal, a draft revision, revised charter. Community members and stakeholders had the opportunity to look at that draft revised charter and provide any further feedback that they had on those changes. The commission then came back and made further final revisions to the charter to then be presented to the governor. In early March, the revised charter was submitted to the governor for her review, which is mandated by the Home Rule City Act. The governor did send back changes to proposed changes to the charter. She at that time did not approve the revised charter, but it's the view of the charter that we can move forward without the approval by the governor. And that brings me to the current status of the charter as it stands now. In May. Well, let me back. Let me see. I believe this was in March. Let me take it back. Yes, on March 5th, we did submit the charter to the clerk's office for, we certified the copy of the revised charter to the city clerk's office. After that, we then put forth a ballot question for Proposal P to Detroit voters to be on the August 3rd election. We have had legal action to prevent the Proposal P from being placed on the ballot, but as it stands now, the Michigan Supreme Court has issued a ruling to stay of the lower court's ruling, and right now the Proposal P is on the August 3rd ballot, and we are awaiting final ruling from the Michigan Supreme Court. In these coming weeks, we will continue our education process from the Detroit Charter Revision Commission about the various changes in the revised charter. We have taken, again, thousands of hours of meetings, hundreds of revised revision proposals, and I want to make that clear that this has been a community effort. This was not an effort of just the 9 commissioners coming together to say that this is a charter we wanted. This was truly a charter provided by feedback of residents in the city. And we'll be talking about the Board of Police Commissioners changes today. And as a chair of the Public Safety and Agency Subcommittee, we did implement many of the changes that the Board of Police Commissioners put forth to us as well. So again, thank you for having me here. I hope that covered again at least the top lines of the process of the last 3 years, but also I'm happy to answer any questions at the end around that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCampbell. Now, Melanie White will give us a brief history and purpose of the Detroit Police Commission. and input by the police commissioner to the city charter revision ideas and areas of agreement by the police commissioners about proposed changes to the police commission.
Good evening again, and thank you for having me participate on this panel discussion this afternoon. Again, on behalf of the Honorable Board of Police Commissioners for the City of Detroit, thank you for inviting us to participate. I do see and would like to acknowledge Chairperson Willie Bell, who is also in attendance this afternoon, Commissioner William Davis of District 7, and also Commissioner Martin Jones, at-large Vice Chairperson-elect. And I will also acknowledge the rest of the board members later on during this presentation, but wanted to make those introductions. So as the PowerPoint presentation is coming up and giving a brief history and purpose of the Board of Police Commissioners, in 1967, the community residents experienced a challenging time with the civil unrest occurring within the city and around the country as it relates to racial injustice, accusations of police misconduct, police brutality, and abuse of authority by law enforcement officers. During this time period, this served as a pivotal moment in history where voters, specifically here in the city of Detroit, determined that a change was needed and that checks and balances were important to ensure police reform and other reform initiatives. One of the most important ways of creating and implementing that kind of change was through the city charter. Thus, in 1967, again, the riot, rebellion, the uprising was the start of the Detroit reform. This led to structural government change with the new charter drafted in the early 1970s. A vote on the new charter occurred in 1973. And this also led to new political direction with regards to the first Black mayor in 1974. The 1973 charter created the Board of Police Commissioners. Mayor Coleman Young appointed 5 members to the Board of Police Commissioners, and they held their first meeting in July of 1974, where they identified key powers for oversight. And some of those powers included the following. The Board of Police Commissioners would be charged to ensure that the Chief of Police would appear before the board. Also, the board would hire the HR director, and the Board of Police Commissioners would have oversight of public complaints against police and also require a public record of complaints. And the board would also have subpoena powers. And so this was the start, again, of the Board of Police Commissioners in 1974. Again, under Mayor Young's administration, or during his administration, again, he appointed a 5-member board, and the intent was to ensure that those board members represented diversity in race, gender, ethnicity, religion, profession, and community involvement, and that they were reflective of the community. The board's composition was also developed to ensure that board members brought forth a vast array of knowledge, skills, wisdom, and experience with regards to creating change and reform within the police department. In this manner, the board would ensure the best constitutional policing and best public safety, given their input from Detroiters and the diverse group of board members that were appointed to that board. So the following board members composed the 1974 appointed board member at that time: Reverend Charles Butler, a well-known Eastside pastor; Douglas Frazier, a UAW leader; Professor Edward Littlejohn, a lawyer and college professor; Susan Mills Peak, an activist and a community organizational director; and also Alexander Ritchie, who was a corporate executive and school board member. And again, these members comprised and were reflective of the community. And that is what the voters intended when they implemented the city charter changes at that time. With respect to the 1974 charter, again, this was the benchmark for civilian oversight, and it endured until 2012, almost 4 decades later. The community at that time had observed many events and incidents that led to the reform, another reform in 2012. Some of those events included the following: the death of Malice Green in 1992, where the community had observed Walter Butson and Larry Nevers tried and convicted for the beating of Malice Green to death on November 5th, 1992. The community was also outraged over a notorious officer, Eugene Brown, whom authorities investigated for 9 shootings. No charges were filed against him. The city had to pay lawsuits, and there was no mechanism to stop him from being promoted. These and other factors led the community to pressure Mayor Dennis Archer to request a U.S. Department of Justice investigation, in which he did so in December of 2000. So from there, the DOJ found substantial issues, and Detroit was under 2 federal consent decrees until 2014. Before the consent decree ended, Detroiters exercised their power to create their own change and destiny within the new charter in 2012. Amid this consent decree judgments, Detroiters wanted to enact change independent and separate from a consent decree judgment or any other entity. They wanted to make sure that their voices were heard and that they were also a part of that democratic process. And so they enacted their own change by way of the new charter in 2012. And also, of course, again, the consent decree was moving along at the same time. Detroiters spoke their vision and made it plain within the 2012 charter. So starting in November 2011, voters approved a new charter with key changes for the board, and those changes were as follows. The board composition would more than double in size. It would go from 5 appointed members to 11 members, 7 elected and 4 appointed. In the 2012 charter, the board would gain broader powers in terms of supervisory oversight and control. And then also the board would be in charge of the search and hiring process for the police chief. And so those powers, again, were instituted by the vote of the people, and they were distinct from the 1974 charter. And just summarizing the brief history and purpose and the timeline that we've walked through. 2012, the charter takes effect and the first BOPC district elections are held. In 2013, the Detroit home rule powers are suspended. And that is where the emergency manager then took control and filed for municipal bankruptcy. In July of 2013, the emergency manager then hires a new police chief. So during all of these major events within the city, the board is still acting in its oversight role, but there are some factors here that are playing and impacting how the board would impact the police department and also their oversight as it relates to, how robust their powers were intended to be in 2012. Again, in 2012, the vote of the people implemented broader, more robust powers, the supervisory oversight and control. But in 2013, because of the emergency manager and the emergency management agreement, the board's authority was withdrawn at that time. In 2014, the federal court order ends the consent decree judgment in September of 2014. And then in 2015, the BOPC powers were restored. So it wasn't until a couple of years later or a few years later that the board was actually able to implement what the voters wanted to see in their civilian oversight entity within the city of Detroit. So once the BOPC powers were restored by City Council in September, and then they later became, the board's powers became effective in December of 2015, the board then began rebuilding its oversight process and functions in 2016. And essentially voters wanted the civilian oversight entity, the Board of Police Commissioners, to keep a public watch over the police. They wanted the board to be the eyes and ears of the community. They also wanted the board to provide a public platform of transparency and accountability. Voters also intended for the board and the Civilian Oversight Agency to take and investigate non-criminal complaints against police and investigate them. They wanted this oversight agency to help expose and correct wrongdoing. Also, the board was, the charter implemented changes for the board to help the department reflect the community values and demographics. And currently, as I previously indicated, there are 11 board members who are volunteers and who meet weekly. And this information is on the slide. And also the board has 20 staff members where there are 16 investigators. There are 4 administrative staff members. And then we also have 2 members who are support administrative staff. And the board's budget is approximately $3.7 million. So, and by way of introducing all of the commissioners, all of the board members on the board at this time, I will start off with the Chairperson Willie E. Bill, District 4. Vice Chairperson Annie Mae Holt at large is the Vice Chairperson, and immediate past Chairperson is Commissioner Lisa Carter of District 6. And then starting with District 1, the elected commissioners, Commissioner Darrell D. Brown, District 1, Commissioner Linda Bernard, District 2, Commissioner Shirley A. Birch, District 3, Commissioner Willie E. Burton, District 5, Commissioner William M. Davis, District 7, and commissioners at large, Commissioner Jesus Hernandez, Commissioner Reverend Holly, who also serves at large, Chairperson-elect, and then Commissioner Jones, Vice Chairperson-elect, who also serves at large. And you will see by looking at this map, this is listed by precincts and districts so that the public is aware of where their commissioner is within their respective precinct or district. So moving right to the BOPC approved recommendations to the Charter Revision Commission, keep in mind when the board approved these recommendations as a full board and by a vote of the majority board members, this was approved in February of 2019, February 13, 2019 to be exact, at an evening community meeting. So this means that the meeting was held in an open public forum where community members were in attendance and were also able to share feedback on the board's recommendations and solicit their comments and provide their recommendations and their suggestions. And they were able to do that leading up to this meeting, leading up to the February 13th meeting. Additionally, the community was able to hear live discussion from board members on the approved BOPC recommendations made to the Charter Revision Commission. So just walking through the approved recommendations, they are as follows. The BOPC must approve all appointments and promotions by the Chief of Police of the Detroit Police Department. Currently, the Board of Police Commissioners through the 2012 City Charter only has the authority to approve the promotions, only the promotions and the appointment to the rank of Deputy Chief. And so the board determined that there was a need for the oversight entity to approve all appointments and all promotions made by the Chief of Police. The board also approved term lengths of appointed commissioners that they be reduced to 4 years. The BOPC meetings will take a summer vacation recess in August, along with the current break for Christmas and Thanksgiving. Again, these were recommendations that were approved by the full board, not necessarily implemented within the proposed charter revision charter that you see today. Also, the Board of Police Commissioners voted to approve that they shall maintain their current composition of 4 appointed board members and 7 elected commissioners. Also, the BOPC shall change the annual election from July to January, and the BOPC shall receive a per diem meeting stipend. Remember, you might recall that I indicated earlier that the Board of Police Commissioners meets every single week. And currently within the 2012 charter, the provision allows for reasonable reimbursements for attending those weekly meetings. However, the board determined by a vote of the majority board that they should receive a per diem meeting stipend because of the level of responsibility and duties that they hold, each as individual commissioners for their districts and precincts and for the entire city, but also as a full board because of how active they are each day and really on an hourly basis with the police department, making sure that the checks and balances are there. And of course, the transparency and accountability is there as well. Additional recommendations that the board also approved were that the BOPC board secretary shall serve as the executive director. The board determined that the title of the secretary to the board should be commensurate and should be reflective of the actual duties and work responsibilities that that staff member would have. Additionally, the board approved that if there is a vacancy of an elected commissioner, the BOPC shall appoint the successor by a majority vote. Also, the BOPC shall influence how arbitrators are appointed for DPD hearings. Currently, the board by the city charter does not speak to that particular provision. And so the board determined that they needed to have influence and impact in that regard and be able to appoint or have some impact in terms of how the arbitrators for DPD's administrative hearings were set in place. Additionally, the board approved that a DPD member's disciplinary history shall affect a promotion. So here again, we're speaking about other factors that play a part as it relates to the board's authority and how that authority actually plays out. So you have the city charter provisions that lay out the board's authority, but then you also have the collective bargaining agreements that also impact how that authority will actually be applied. And because the collective bargaining agreements are governed by the Public Employment Relations Act, that is a binding authority by state law. And so the collective bargaining unions have the right to collectively bargain, and that is again governed by state law, and state law trumps local law and municipal law. And so the board wanted to have an impact in that regard, and they wanted to include that in the charter revision proposal, and they wanted to make an impact in that regard. Additionally, the board determined that the arbitrator shall only make a recommendation and that the BOPC shall be the final authority on discipline. And here again, I am speaking again that although in the current city charter, in the 2012 charter, it does indicate that the board shall serve as the final disciplinary authority as it relates to imposing discipline involving DPD members. Again, you still have this collective bargaining agreement that does weigh in and serves as a precedent in terms of its binding agreement. And so the board wanted to make an impact in that regard. And then the last of the recommendations included recommendations regarding the Office of the Chief Investigator. So the board made recommendations and approved provisions that would ensure that The DPD members would cooperate with OCI investigations. The approval of retaliation, obstruction, or interference being prohibited. That provision would also be included in the charter, the proposed charter. And then also public policy and collective bargaining agreements must be in accordance with BOPC OCI policies. So all of these last three recommendations are primarily already internal procedures as it relates to DPD policies and procedures, and of course the board's policies and procedures, but they determined by a vote of the majority board that these provisions should also be included in the governing document for the city, which is the city charter. And those include all of the recommendations that were made by the board members during that community meeting. With respect to the question that was identified earlier, and also in the outline that was provided in terms of the community's feedback about the recommendations for the Board of Police Commissioners, we know that Detroiters, voters have the final say as it relates to how they want their civilian oversight agency to operate, what they want them to look like, how they want their oversight impact to be. So civilian oversight in Detroit is very much determined by what Detroiters view as important. The community in 1970 was visionary, and they were visionary by enacting a framework for civil rights that endured and remains to this day a national role model. Many other jurisdictions, other areas around the country, around the globe, look to Detroit as a national role model and a model for oversight and policing as it relates to best practices and recommendations that they can implement within their jurisdictions. Detroiters have spoken clearly in the 1974 and 2012 charters about the type of oversight that they want to have. And again, many other oversight entities look to Detroit for that kind of example and that model, because the board's authority is so robust, and because Detroiters were visionaries when they made those changes, those key changes in 1974 and in the 2012 charters. So essentially, Detroiters want the Board of Police Commissioners and its oversight entity to be the civilian eyes and ears. They want the board to be unpaid volunteers, meaning that the board members don't receive a salary. And also the voters, Detroiters, wanted the board and this oversight entity to have power in determining the culture, with hiring the HR director, which was outlined in 1974, to be the final disciplinary authority, which was outlined in 1974, have authority over promotions, again in 1974, have control over non-criminal complaints in 2012, and then also be in charge of conducting a search for the chief of police in 2012. With respect to the infrastructure of civilian oversight, the Detroit is a member of the National Association for the Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement, or NACO. And you heard, I indicated earlier that we interact and communicate with our neighboring oversight agencies quite often, and annually as well during the NACO's annual conference, and then also during our regular various trainings that they hold throughout the year. So through NACO and as practitioners, we know that other practitioners from around the globe have expressed sentiments and feedback in terms of their observations of the Board of Police Commissioners, the city of Detroit, and how civilian oversight is implemented and enacted here, right here within our local jurisdiction. So they've expressed surprise that the Detroit board meets weekly. Many other oversight agencies do not meet weekly like the Board of Police Commissioners does. And so they have expressed their sentiment regarding that item. Other oversight practitioners have also expressed envy regarding the board's authority and subpoena power. If you recall, I mentioned earlier, we walked through all of the various powers that the board obtained both in 1974 and then the power that was expanded in 2012. And so many oversight agencies do not have that kind of robust, broad power. And keep in mind too, the board is one of the historic and oldest civilian oversight agencies in the country. And so with that, the board comes with a high level of knowledge, experience, wisdom, and key recommendations and advice that they too can share and that they share on an ongoing basis with other practitioners and other jurisdictions around the country. Other practitioners have also expressed their respect for the independent process Detroit has for receiving and investigating complaints. And I indicated earlier, the Office of the Chief Investigator is the board's investigative arm, and they investigate some close to 1,500 complaints each year relating to alleged police misconduct. And that is done separate and distinct from the Detroit Police Department. And the board is the final authority in terms of reviewing and approving those citizen complaint investigations. And then ultimately, of course, the city charter is always at play. And then a collective bargaining agreement is always at play as it relates to discipline. And then again, lastly, practitioners have asked its ability to make change quickly and effectively. You might recall last year with George Floyd, the fatal killing of George Floyd, Board of Police Commissioners quickly the department's use policy and did that by conducting a robust review and evaluation of the department's policy in combination and in cooperation with the department. And they made key changes to that policy to ensure that it was greatly enhanced and in line with best practices, and also included common sense practical approaches to that policy. And so some of those key changes included ensuring that there was a duty to intervene for officers. If they observed any wrongdoing, then they would immediately and quickly intervene in that situation. Also, there was a recommendation for the general prohibition against strangleholds and chokeholds, and also a prohibition against shooting at moving vehicles. And then the Board of Police Commissioners quickly and effectively made changes in terms of ensuring that a de-escalation policy was included within that use of force policy so that the department members would understand that de-escalation would be their first alternative or their first option to consider as they navigate throughout their duties and responsibilities when interacting and conducting traffic stops and investigations and various other police activities. The board saw a need and determined that the duty to de-escalate and have that particular provision within that policy was very much needed. And so again, practitioners have expressed how quickly the board reacts and provides great enhancement to the department and its policies. So the BOPC in 2020 in October, conducted a BOPC feedback and received various feedback and recommendations and just observations from the community in terms of how they view the civilian oversight entity and how they view the Detroit Police Department. So just kind of highlighting some of those key survey responses that we received. The board received answer choices in terms of voters determined that they understood that the board was there to provide oversight or supervision by people, so that the police would know that the public is watching. So they understood the purpose and the intent of the Board of Police Commissioners. Additionally, the voters and people who participated in this survey process also indicated that they understood that the Board of Police Commissioners would take and investigate complaints about the police. Keep in mind, again, the Board of Police Commissioners has been in existence for 47 years. And so residents, Detroiters, and surveyors determined that they understood and they were aware that they knew the purpose of the Board of Police Commissioners in terms of accepting and investigating police misconduct complaints. Also, the surveyors determined that they understood that they knew the board was there to make sure that bad or abusive officers do not work for the city of Detroit. And they determined and weighed in terms of they knew that the board was there to work with the department to reduce crime and to make our neighborhoods safer. And so essentially, those were the comments and feedback that we received from the community in our last survey. And just by way of summarizing my portion of the presentation, as someone who has been active with NACO and of course with Oversight for the last 17 years, and then also as an oversight practitioner who has operated and done work under 2 federal consent decrees, I can attest to Detroit doing a lot of things right. We're doing many things right here, and people are often in awe of how advanced and how progressive we are as a city, how progressive we are in terms of the oversight agency here, the Board of Police Commissioners, and also the Detroit Police Department. And so we build upon, and the Board of Police Commissioners builds upon those key measures, and they work to make improvements every day that they perform in their oversight duties. The board is here to give Detroiters the best constitutional policing and best public safety that they possibly can, and they work to do that every single day. And so just giving some information in terms of how Detroiters and how people can stay connected and can stay engaged with the Board of Police Commissioners. The board meets each Thursday at 3 p.m. Right now, the board is meeting on Zoom. At some point that will change when the board returns to its in-person meetings, but announcements will be made in that regard. People can also contact the Board of Police Commissioners at any time. You don't have to wait until Thursday to voice your concerns. So you can contact the board's administrative office, and the information is listed on the screen. 313-596-1830 is the Board of Police Commissioners administrative number. And then you can also email the Board of Police Commissioners at bopc@detroitmi.gov. Regarding complaint investigations, individuals may reach and may contact the Office of the Chief Investigator to file a non-criminal complaint. And you can do that 24 hours, 7 days a week. There's a 24-hour complaint line, 313-596-2499. The fax number is 313-596-2482. And you may visit the website, the board's website at detroitmi.gov/BOPC. And again, these are ways to get involved with the BOPC, to stay active and informed, to share your voice, and to also enhance police community relations. And we understand and we know that this is a community effort. It's the Board of Police Commissioners, it's the Detroit Police Department, it's the community, it's all voices and all stakeholders and all parties working together to enhance and make our community safer and make it the best place to work and live and play. And so thank you again for the opportunity to share information on behalf of the Board of Police Commissioners.
Thank you, Ms. White. Now, Denzel McCampbell and Melanie White will talk about community input in terms of police commission changes via the charter.
Just a clarification for the agenda, would you like me to go over the actual changes that we made for the commission?
I believe that was what the agenda is saying. Is that true, Cheryl?
Really, we were just asking, I mean, we don't have time for all of that. I wish we did. I'd love to have those
Yep.
actual changes. But in terms of community input, I know you already referenced it, Denzel.
Mhm.
But if you want to just highlight how you got the input from various groups, or I mean, we have about very limited time. So whatever you'd like to say about any more outreach to the community, please do say that, and Melanie also.
Absolutely. And what I can, and I will, what I can give to folks.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry about that. Can you hear me now? Great. Oh, so what I'll do, just to make sure folks do have an understanding of the changes we made, I will put the link to the website in the chat where you can view the revised charter that was approved, as well as the section for the Board of Police Commissioners. What I can just briefly say, going into how we got community input, and I'll make it quick. We did accept a lot and implement a lot of the changes that the Board of Police Commissioners did put forth. What I can tell you is that we absolutely put that the Board of Police Commissioners should have say among appointments and promotions. We also put in per diems, as well as this disciplinary record being a part of any consideration for promotions. And the collective bargaining piece as well, of ensuring that any collective bargaining agreement has the policies and the charter put forth as well, in accordance to, as Ms. Melanie White indicated, in accordance to state law, because we did have that guidance from our general counsel. Some areas that I want to point out that is, I want to make sure, in the effort of transparency, the folks to know, the Charter Commission did put in the revised charter to only have an elected Board of Police Commissioner, a 7-member body of the Board of Police Commission. In also doing so, we did put provisions that would not allow any folks who had experience with working in law enforcement to be on the Board of Police Commission. And I know folks will think about, ask why that is the case. Through the conversation, this is going to public input, we had a lot of folks put forth from the public to come that they truly wanted, in the spirit of the creation of the Board of Police Commission that Ms. White went over, wanted to have a true oversight body. And there was some concern in today's age, that having law enforcement, former law enforcement folks on the Board of Commissioners would not present a true oversight board. This is not to say that the board cannot have input, that the board cannot have interaction, or that the board cannot have guidance from folks in law enforcement, but we're talking about the members of the Board of Police Commission. So I just want to make that clear as folks look at that language, and again, for transparency. For the public input, I want folks to know that the time that we were having these meetings and having the input was also around the time that folks across the world saw the murder of George Floyd. That this is a time that we had mass mobilizations of protests, and folks have really deep concerns over civilian oversight in the police department. So as you will see in the revised charter, we have put I tell folks, it's really in an effort to strengthen the Board of Police Commission. We really valued the input that the Board of Police Commissioners had sent themselves, and we were in deep agreement. I know Ms. White was on those meetings, but they were hours long that we had questions and would go back and forth to get that down. So I will say the Board of Police Commissioners and the police department, with the public input, had the largest amount of revisions submitted. as we're talking about public input. And as I talked about before, we had a focus group over civilian oversight that they did a report on how civilian oversight looked across the country. They cited some of the same bodies that Ms. White cited as well, and went into recommendations to put forth of the composition of the board and various aspects, including the collective bargaining language as well. So there was a lot of agreement. Of course, there were some areas that they're diverge, but I really feel, and as we're looking at the charter at the revised charter, this was working with the Board of Police Commissioners and working with the residents. This was where we wanted to see the true community involvement and working together. And we didn't get that a lot for other aspects of the charter, but we did get it with the Board of Police Commissioners. And whether or not we all agree on all of the changes, I really do. I want to commend the Board of Police Commissioners and Ms. White and the staff for putting together the recommendations, and also the public and the community members who spent hours on this as well.
Thank you. I would just add that, again, thank you for working with us and accepting the information that we did submit on behalf of the Honorable Board of Police Commissioners with regards to their approved recommendations and other support material, just to give, background information about the Board of Police Commissioners. I would say that irregardless of, if the charter revision proposal is actually solidified and that is finalized in terms of those recommendations going forward on the ballot, many of those recommendations and many of those, I guess the intent behind the recommendations that were made by some of the community members and some of the other entities, the board currently has those internal processes and procedures in place. So there are certain things that the board does on a day-to-day basis in terms of working with the police department, in terms of making sure that certain reports are forwarded to the Board of Police Commissioners as a way for them to keep the checks and balances in place. That is the way that they're able to operate on a weekly basis, in the sense that they have to have reports coming back to them. They have to have this communication and this dialogue going forward on a daily basis with the department in order for them to properly be prepared for their weekly board meetings, and to even know what is taking place as relates to the police department and what activities are going forward and what is occurring. So some of those recommendations that we observed in the proposed charter, some of those provisions are already innately embedded in what the Board of Police Commissioners has to do on a day-to-day basis in working with the Detroit Police Department. And with respect to the community and how they can stay informed and stay engaged and stay a part of this process with the Board of Police Commissioners, with the City of Detroit, obviously with the Detroit Police Department, I identified some ways earlier in terms of they have the board's weekly meetings. They can contact the board at any given time to share their concerns, share their recommendations. We post our policies, the department's policies online so that the public can weigh in and provide feedback and also give their recommendations as it relates to what they want to see within Detroit Police Department policy. And so Detroiters, voters, residents, anyone who wants to share their feedback with respect to DPD operations always has the discretion and the flexibility to do so at any given time. And so again, the board is there to represent the community, there to speak on behalf of the community, but then you also have the community having a voice at the table as well. So.
Thank you. Thank you both. Now, Ruth Colwin will do an overview of the responses to the revised charter and to the changes in the police commission by the mayor and governor's offices, and where one can find out more information. This and the PowerPoint I will be able to email to people who registered via Eventbrite. If you didn't register via Eventbrite, please send me a message at jdye@detroitpubliclibrary.org, and I will be happy to send it.
Thanks. Yeah, so as both Melanie and Denzel have indicated, there's been a lot of recent sort of back and forth about the Proposal P, which is the new proposed Detroit City Charter. And that started, or we will start when they submitted that to the governor on March 5th. So they submitted the proposed charter, and in the meantime, the mayor reviewed that, and in particular found issue with the possible budget implications that new proposed charter might have. He published those and spoke publicly about those on April 26th, and made it clear that he objected to some of the proposed charter based on those fiscal issues that he saw. Later, Governor Whitmer responds to the submitted proposed charter. Her review relies heavily on the Attorney General Dana Nessel's review, and responds more to places where the charter is either not entirely clear on how it will fit into state and federal law, or the also a little bit the Chapter 9 bankruptcy plan that the city is still working under. And so that is more a legal thing. And in her response, which is will be attached, or you can get to from the links at the end of this, there are a lot of points that are made very specifically in her response that was published on April 30th. A lot of those do still reference, especially the Chapter 9 bankruptcy plan, some of the concerns of the budget. And here you'll see again, this is actually the link that Denzel, I think you published, which has where you can download her response to the charter. And then this up above is just how that response was made, and which groups of people in the state government helped craft that response. Later then, the Charter Commission revises the proposed charter in response to the areas of concern underlined in the governor's letter and response that is resubmitted on May 11. In response then later to Mayor Duggan's concerns, the charter also provides an independent analysis of the budget and the financial implications of the proposed charter, which was conducted through Michigan State University. This analysis is really looking at trying to find more detail in the city's budget and how they're calculating the cost. There's a pretty big difference between them. The mayor's budget or the mayor's predictions say it could cost up to 4 million, 2 billion, 4 million, 5 million in the first year, and up to 2 billion over the next 4 years. And the commission's independent analysis through MSU looks at a much more reduced number of about 7 million a year, I think, if I'm remembering that correctly. I should have put that in there. The governor, after receiving the new and revised charter from the Charter Commission, decides against reviewing that revised charter on May 24th. That choice is made not maybe because, but among a few legal complaints against both the city clerk, Janice Winfrey, and the Detroit Charter Revision Commission about whether the proposal P should be on the August 3rd primary ballot or not. Then we hear from Wayne County Circuit Court Judge Timothy Kenny. He orders that Proposal P be removed from the August 3rd primary ballot. And he is merging in that decision, also merging the two separate lawsuits that have been brought that are seeking to block that charter proposal. This decision is made because the proposal so the governor did not approve the proposed charter. So this goes back to the Attorney General's decision and review of that charter, saying that that the charter, in her view, in Nestle's view, the charter could still go on the ballot because her reading of the law basically says that while the governor's approval is encouraged, it's not necessary. And Justice Kenny decides against that. And that is upheld later by the Michigan Court of Appeals on June 3rd, most recently. And we're currently waiting for a Michigan Supreme Court ruling. And one of the judges, however, dissented and agrees with the Attorney General that the proposed charter could appear on the ballot without the governor's approval. So that's where we are now, waiting for the Supreme Court to give a final ruling on whether Proposal P can be on the city charter, can be on the August 3rd primary ballot. And these are the links I use to compile this, and I can also upload these files to the chat. So.
Could I just provide one update? I think Ruth really covered it well. Just to provide one update for the Supreme Court, they did send out a stay on they did issue a stay on the Court of Appeals ruling, which means that it allowed the ballots to be, the city of Detroit had a deadline for ballots to be printed last week. So it allowed the ballots to be printed with Proposal P. So the question now before the Supreme Court, we're waiting on this if that question will be valid. So I just wanted to provide that update as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for that addition. Now, Denzel McCampbell will talk about the next steps before and after the August vote.
Absolutely. And thank you all again. And thank you, Ruth, again for that very in-depth breakdown. I do want to let folks know we are in the education phase of the charter revision process. As we are awaiting the final say from the Michigan Supreme Court, we are moving ahead to educate folks across the city about what's actually in the charter, to educate on the analysis that we have done. It has been disheartening to see the analysis by the city of the $3.4 billion. Our own analysis that was pointed to by Michigan State is only $7 million a year to implement. A part of that education process is letting folks know that the charter is not a budget mandate. It's a structure of the city to carry out these programs. The budgeting of those things will be carried out by the administration and the city council. So once the August 3rd vote happens, whether if it is a yes vote on a valid question on the ballot, the charter will then go through the phases of being implemented. There is some publishing that has to happen according with state law and things for it to then be implemented, and then it will go into effect. What to note here is that doesn't mean that everything that has been revised in the charter will go into effect. There are some aspects of the charter that the commission did put. For example, there are some things that the city council has 180 days to create an ordinance for, or to say that once this step happens, then this will be implemented. So as you read the charter, you will see some of those things happen. But there is an implementation phase, then the charter will be in effect. If the charter is not adopted, then we will continue on with the 2012 charter that was spoken of. Then that charter also lays out that then a question will be placed on the ballot every fourth gubernatorial election. So You can start counting from 2018. I believe that would get us to 2034. Then another question would be placed on the ballot asking Detroiters if they would like to open up the charter for revisions again. So that process will reset and continue. But again, we're going to continue to educate folks. I will definitely encourage folks to go to DetroitCharter2018.com to take a look at the charter. The text is there. I want to make sure folks have that accurate information. I can sit here and talk to you all day about it. And I'm sure we can go on and on, but I do want to encourage folks to read the charter. It is a long document. So if you want some light morning reading, or you have some nice tea that you can sit down and read, I would definitely encourage that. But that is the breakdown of where we go from here. And as always, if folks have questions, there is contact on that website, but I'll also put my email address in the chat as well. So thank you.
Thank you. And Melanie White will now address, does the Police Commission or the City Council have the authority to make changes in how the Police Commission provides oversight and their work?
Yes, thank you for that question. And I probably touched on that area a little bit earlier. Yes, the Board of Police Commissioners has the authority and the discretion to make changes or implement procedural items within the day-to-day operation of the Board of Police Commissioners. Given that the city charter has the broad, again, the broad supervisory oversight, authority, and control that's outlined for the Board of Police Commissioners, just in that phrase entails the board's dynamic supervisory responsibilities and their authority to implement key changes that they see are needed on a day-to-day basis or even on a weekly basis. And so that does take place if you are able to attend any of the Board of Police Commissioners meetings, as I indicated earlier, each Thursday at 3 p.m. You will hear that kind of dialogue and discussion take place between the board, the chief of police, DPD executives, and the community. And you hear right there in a live meeting, in a live discussion where community members are able to voice their concerns, also share what they believe should be changed or adjusted, or the types of policies that they think need to be implemented within the police department, or any number of issues, issues regarding crime or, speeding, drag racing, that kind of thing. All of those issues are raised at the Board of Police Commissioners meetings, and the board, in combination with the department, work together to develop ways in which they can effectively and efficiently and quickly address those issues. So yes, to your question, the Board of Police Commissioners does have the authority to make those key changes as they see fit at any given time.
Thank you. We have a little time for questions. We don't have as much time as we thought we would have. To begin with, Ruth will give us the questions that came up in the chat. After that, if you want to come down to reactions at the bottom of the screen, you can raise your hand to say that you have a question you would like to ask.
Yeah, and so we don't have too many questions in the chat, but we do have one, Melanie, I believe for you. Does the OCI publicly report the outcomes of investigations? Where can case level complaint information be found?
So thank you for that question. Currently, the Office of the Chief Investigator posts its data on what's called the Open Data Portal. And there you will find the various complaint investigation information that was filed with that office. And then you would also find the pertinent information in terms of the outcome, the findings of the investigation, what the allegations were. So if you visit the Open Data Portal, you can search that information and pull up the complaint that you are searching for. Also, through the City of Detroit Law Department, there are other mechanisms in which to obtain various information regarding the citizen complaint investigation. So yes, that is posted publicly, but there are also other ways in which one can obtain that information.
And there was a URL maybe that we could share in the chat?
So the board's website that I indicated earlier, which is essentially the city's website, people can visit that website and you can find how some of the citizen complaint investigation data is also listed on the board's website. So again, that's at detroitmi.gov/BOPC. We can obtain the open data portal website and also have that listed with the list of resources that you identified earlier, and that can be also displayed for the public so that they will know how to visit that website and how to navigate in accessing those citizen complaint investigations.
Sure. Another question earlier, Melanie, would you mind if I uploaded your PDF, your slide presentation, your PowerPoint slide presentation as a PDF?
That is fine. Yes, thank you.
And I think, unless someone else has a hand raised.
Else have a question that you would like to place? No, we covered everything. Thank you both very much. I appreciate all the work that you've done on this. And thank you everyone who came. This is the last program we're doing for the 2020-2021 year. We will be starting up again in September. And if you have suggestions for material that you'd like for us to cover, email me at jdye@detroitpubliclibrary.org.
We have a question, looks like.
I think somebody had their hands up.
Okay, I didn't see, oh, yes. Chair Bowman.
Yeah, I was wondering, this is directed toward Melanie White. How many commissioners were in favor, how many voted for and how many voted against the revisions that the Board of Police Commissioners was recommending to the Charter Commission?
Thank you for that question. So again, this meeting was February 13th of 2020, and the meeting minutes are posted on the city's website, where it walks through each of the recommendations that were raised and discussed. And then it also includes the voting results of each recommendations. And so I would encourage to visit the board's website and obtain the minutes. I don't have that information directly in front of me, but it is available on the public website.
Thank you. Do we have more questions?
If I can just add one final thought, I'm sorry. I would just say, I think overall, and what you've heard today, is that we have an engaged, we have an engaged community here in the city of Detroit. Going back to the creation of, as Ms. White talked about, the creation of the Board of Police Commission itself and the subsequent charter revisions that have come forward. We saw that with the charter revision in 2018 with the over 500 revisions. I think what we have, and I know this is the work that the League of Women Voters goes into, to have these forums, to have this public conversation, and to drive this conversation. We have visionary folks in the city of Detroit who know what they want to see when it comes to civilian oversight, when it comes to their police department, when it comes to their entire city government. So I would just put forth, as folks are engaged in the city charter, as folks are engaged in elections and government as a whole, to really think about the visionary aspect that residents have put forth in this charter. And that's what I just add. That's what I'll leave with here. Thank you.
Cheryl.
Thank you. I can never work those things at the bottom. Oh, any rate, I was wondering, the kind of policy, because we didn't really, you mentioned that, Melanie, I think some, and I don't remember what's in the new city charter that authorizes writing policy, but is policy the ability to write policy for the Detroit Police Department? Is that currently part of your function, or is that what the charter is encouraging, is putting that kind of power in your hands?
So thank you for that question, Ms. Buckoff. So essentially in the 2012 charter, in this current charter, the board already has the authority to create, develop and implement police policy in consultation with the chief of police and with the approval of the mayor. So that authority is already there in the current charter. The Board of Police Commissioners has taken various steps in terms of on any given policy, revising it, sharing recommendations to the Board of Police Commissioners, submitting their specific provisions that they would like to see implemented within police policy. And so, yes, that is already embedded in the board's oversight role and in their charter authority currently. So that would not necessarily be anything additional that this proposed charter would do. Is already embedded in the current charter.
And just to add there, and that's absolutely right. And what we did for the charter, we did go into some more specific areas. As you'll read, there are some areas that we have put forth to the Board of Police Commissioner in consultation with the department to create what's called a peace plan that's talking about the policing and community aspect and relating to that, which I know the Board of Police Commissioner already does, but we want to codify that to ensure that continues. We also put some provisions in to create policy around youth engagement at the time that we're in, making sure that there is that relationship with the board, the department, and young folks in the city as well. So definitely, our view was to, again, strengthen that and add to the policies that were already there with the board.
Yes,
Can I ask one more question? I'm sorry.
yes. Chair Bowman, did you have another question you wanted to ask too? No? Okay. Cheryl?
Well, I know after reading some things, it really does help to attend your meetings, both of yours, and to read things. I knew nothing about either really before, but the city council and the relationship between the police commission and the city council and the charter commission. I mean, and if one wanted to throw in the mayor's office, but when you look at those, the city, what is the relationship, or how does the city council affect what the police commission does, and how does the city charter affect what the city council does or can do? Either of you?
So Ms. White, if you want to take that first, I'll.
Oh, okay. I thought that you were going to take the question first. Well, so the city council, of course, is involved in that process too. I remember when I spoke earlier about the board, the department, the community, city council is always a part of that process because they have very robust authority in their legislative authority, but they also have the contracts and procurement authority where they approve contracts for the city of Detroit. So essentially anything that has to be approved that has a dollar amount, a certain dollar amount, has to go through city council. And so yes, they play a huge role and an impact in what the Board of Police Commissioners does, what DPD attempts to implement in terms of its technology and various approvals that it seeks from city council. So all of those entities have to work together, and they do work together to enhance and improve the police department. So that is a cooperative effort between those entities.
And I just want to add on, like, just to support that in a way, as a charter revision commission, we didn't attempt to change that at all. We wanted to ensure that continued. We included language to make that clear, and to keep that relationship between the board, the department, the city council, and the administration as well.
Thank you. That was helpful.
Right. Thank you, everyone, for coming this evening. Look forward to learning more about this. Good night.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you
me.
all very much.
Thank you.
We had another hand raised. I don't know.
Oh, we have another question?
It's the same. It might be too late now.
What?
Is it not
Chairman,
too late?
I think we lost Melanie.
Yes.
Yes, Melanie,
Oh.
because I
Actually, it's for
been closing
Denzel.
out. Yes, all right, I'm sorry. I did ask if you wanted another question.
Yeah, well, at the time you first asked, I didn't have one, but I did have one now.
No,
I just wondered if Mr. If the Denzel could, Commissioner McCampbell could, maybe, share with the people present what provisions of the charter would help protect against promotions that go against the will of the board.
Absolutely. So let me just I want to get you the right section. 1 second. So as mentioned, we talked about promotions, and we added language in we clarified the language in section 7-814 that all promotions shall be with the approval of the board, but also that all appointments should be with approval of the board. We also, as mentioned before, as with the Board of Police Commission put forth, added language that employee's disciplinary record shall be considered for the purpose of the promotion of any position. Where an employee with a disciplinary record is promoted, the decision maker shall indicate in writing to the board the reason why the disciplinary record did not restrict the promotion. But we did keep the language and strengthen the language that all promotions shall be with the approval of the board, and all appointments shall be with the approval of the board. We also, as I mentioned before, with the collective bargaining piece, we tried to, as much, and I know Scotty, you were a part of this conversation. We did attempt to put as much language as was afforded by law, and I know there was some back and forth with the general counsel on that, but to try to put as much language there that we're afforded by law to ensure that collective bargaining agreements respected what was going in the charter and respected what the board position was as well. So again, as a whole, the charter is a framework that we have attempted to address those questions. We hope that in implementation and with the further board and administrations moving forward, that they would adhere to the intent around that as well.
okay, thank you. And I think this is it. Good night.
Thank
Good
you.
night, everyone.